Okay, strap in, everybody. We've got a deep dive today, and let's just say this one is straight from the headlines. The kind of story that honestly kind of makes you step back and go, hold on, what's actually going on here?
Yeah, and the potential fallout from this is, well, it's huge. This could really shake things up. We're not just talking about some, boring policy debate. This goes way deeper: immigration, social safety nets, even national security.
You're telling me we've got a whistleblower, and they are making some pretty serious allegations about the refugee resettlement program. And this isn't like, oh, someone messed up some paperwork. This is about possible manipulation of the system, like on a massive scale. The kind of thing that could have major consequences.
Right. So let's get into the specifics here, because as they say, the devil's in the details, right? This whistleblower is claiming they were basically pressured, almost pushed, to find any way they could to get incoming refugees on long-term disability benefits.
Hold up. Not just like, oh, help them get back on their feet benefits. We're talking like set them up for life with Social Security kind of benefits.
That's what it sounds like, yeah. The kind that would guarantee lifelong Social Security payments. It's a choice for sure.
Okay, so red flag number one, why would someone even do that? What's the motive here?
Well, that's a big question, and it's definitely worth looking into. Some folks might jump to conclusions, maybe about political motivations, creating a dependable voting bloc. But we have to be careful about speculation. We need to stick to what we know for sure. And what we do know is that this whistleblower was really uncomfortable, really uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable that they were willing to risk their whole career to come forward. And they even said they were told to help these refugees get Social Security numbers and U.S. passports, like as soon as they got off the plane.
Exactly, that's right. And that detail, it's pretty striking. It suggests that things were being fast-tracked, skipping a normal process, skipping the safeguards that are supposed to be there. Now, look, the refugee resettlement program has always been kind of controversial.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's always been debate about how much it costs taxpayers and the security risks, and it's a hot-button issue, no doubt.
Totally. And some states, like Texas and Tennessee, I think, they've actually pushed back against the program pretty hard. I think they even got into some legal battles with the federal government because of it.
Oh, wow. So the feds can basically ignore what the states want when it comes to resettling refugees. That's some serious power play stuff.
Yeah, there's this thing, it's called the Wilson Fish program, and it basically lets the federal government do an end run around state control. So you can see why states might be a little freaked out. They're losing control over who's coming in, who's living in their state. And of course, that raises questions about transparency and accountability, right?
And probably fuels concerns about security risks too, right? I mean, especially given what the whistleblower said about refugees coming from countries that aren't exactly friendly towards the U.S. They even mentioned Syrians getting into Missouri, even though there was a travel ban. That seems like a big deal.
Yeah, that's another layer to this whole thing. It's one thing to be humanitarian, but it's another to potentially put your own citizens at risk, right? Knowing who's in your state is pretty important if you want to keep everyone safe.
Okay, so we've got potential manipulation of disability benefits, we've got worries about security, and we've got states being basically steamrolled by the federal government. What happens next in this whistleblower's story?
Well, one of the biggest questions that comes up for me is what this means for Social Security in the long run. If people are being encouraged to apply for benefits they don't really need, it could really strain the system, not to mention the ethical problems.
And what about the possibility of fraud, too? The whistleblower talked about being confused by names on passports, especially for people using aliases. Could this be leading to identity theft or other shady stuff?
It's definitely a red flag. When you start hearing about aliases and there's not much clarity on how identities are being verified, it raises some serious questions. It makes you wonder about the integrity of the whole system, and that needs to be investigated carefully.
It's like you open one door and then there's 10 more doors behind it, and you're just like, whoa, hold on. How deep does this rabbit hole go? It makes you think, are there any checks and balances here at all? Is anybody actually checking to see if these disability claims are legit?
Yeah, that's definitely something investigators are going to want to look into. I mean, this whistleblower's testimony could be the thing that blows this whole thing wide open, could trigger a massive investigation into how these resettlement organizations are actually running things, which, honestly, it's probably overdue.
Yeah, because if even half of what this whistleblower is saying is true, it just destroys public trust, right? People need to be able to believe that these programs are actually working the way they're supposed to, that they're helping people who really need it, not being used.
Right, exactly. When people lose faith in the system, it becomes way harder to get support for these kinds of programs down the line. People get critical, they start thinking everything's a scam, and that ends up hurting the people who actually need help. It's a bad cycle.
Yeah, total lose-lose situation. And let's not forget the financial side of this, too. I mean, the whistleblower was pretty clear about how much all this costs taxpayers.
Yeah, that's a major point of contention for sure. Resettlement programs, they're not cheap. You've got housing costs, healthcare, social services, job training. It all adds up fast. And critics argue that without proper vetting and without a focus on making people self-sufficient, those costs, they just become unsustainable for taxpayers.
So then it becomes a question of like, who's in charge here? Who's making sure this money is actually being used wisely? And is anyone holding them accountable?
That's where transparency comes in. Taxpayers deserve to know where their money's going, right? And they need to know if these programs are actually doing what they're supposed to do. Without that transparency, you just breed suspicion and distrust.
And it's bigger than just money too, right? It's about fairness, making sure that resources are being distributed fairly, both within the refugee community and within the larger community.
Absolutely. You need to find that balance between compassion and responsibility. It's about taking care of all your citizens while still upholding humanitarian principles. It's a tough line to walk.
This whole thing feels like peeling back layers of an onion. Every time you think you've got it figured out, there's another layer, and it just gets more and more complicated. It kind of makes you wonder, are there other whistleblowers out there? Other people who've seen similar things?
That's something investigators are probably going to be asking themselves too. I mean, whistleblowers are often the key to uncovering these kinds of things, and they can trigger really important changes. They're like the canary in the coal mine, you know?
And it takes guts to do what they do, right? They're putting their jobs on the line, their reputations, maybe even their safety. So what this whistleblower did, it's really brave.
For sure. They're shining a light on things that might have stayed hidden forever. And that's so important for holding people in power accountable. I mean, if nobody's willing to speak up, then who knows what kind of messed up stuff could be going on.
This whole thing really makes me think about how important it is for all of us to be informed citizens. You know, we can't just sit back and let things happen. We need to be asking questions. We need to be looking deeper. We need to be demanding answers from our elected officials.
That's what democracy is all about, right? Citizen engagement. It's the only way to make sure that people in power are doing the right thing. And it's the only way to make sure that policies actually reflect the values and the needs of the people they're supposed to be serving.
And this is bigger than just one program or one issue. This is about making sure that we have accountability across the board. At every level of government, we have to be paying attention. We have to be informed. And we can't be afraid to speak up.
Exactly. This case shows how crucial those oversight mechanisms are. And it makes you wonder, are they actually working? Are they strong enough to prevent people from abusing the system? Because if not, then who's really looking out for everyone's best interests?
Okay, so this whistleblower, they've definitely pointed a flashlight at some pretty dark corners of the refugee resettlement program. What happens now? Where do we go from here?
This is just the first chapter. I think we're going to see investigations, congressional hearings, maybe even new laws to try and fix the problems that have been exposed. This could be a turning point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, what changes are made, if any. It's kind of nerve-wracking, too, to be honest.
Well, it reminds us that these are really complicated issues with a lot of different moving pieces, and everyone sees things differently. If we want to find real solutions, it's going to take a lot of careful thought, a lot of honest conversations. And everyone needs to be committed to transparency and accountability.
You know, through all of this, it's easy to forget about the refugees themselves. They're the ones stuck in the middle of this whole mess. What happens to them if these allegations are true?
Right. That's the human side of all this. And it's easy to lose sight of that. These are people's lives we're talking about. And their futures are directly tied to these policies and these programs. They deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter what happens with this investigation.
It's so easy to get caught up in the political drama and forget that there are real people at the heart of all this.
Absolutely. We need to remember that these are individuals, each with their own stories, their own hopes and dreams. Their experiences should be shaping how we approach these issues, and they should be guiding us towards solutions that are both compassionate and effective.
This whole situation is a tangled web, man. It's immigration, social welfare, national security. I mean, it's a lot.
It really reflects the bigger challenges we're facing as a society, doesn't it? To deal with these complexities, we need people making smart decisions, ethical leaders, and a real commitment to the well-being of everyone involved. It's a tall order.
So for our listener out there, what does all this mean for them? What should they take away from this whole deep dive into this whistleblower's story and everything it's uncovered?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed and to get involved. These issues, they affect everyone, whether we realize it or not. We can't just sit back and watch.
Yeah, Don't just take what you hear at face value. Do your own research. Ask questions. Demand accountability from the people in charge. Your voice matters.
Exactly. Be critical of the information you're getting, have respectful conversations, fight for policies that reflect your values. That's how you make a difference.
You know, it's easy to lose sight of the human element in all this. We're talking about refugees, people who are running from, horrible situations, looking for a safe place, a chance for a better life.
And that's what we can't forget about. These are people who have been through trauma, hardship, they've lost so much, they're vulnerable, and they're depending on this system to help them get back on their feet.
So if what this whistleblower is saying is true, if people are using this system, twisting it for their own benefit or for political gain, what does that say about us, about our society?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about our priorities, our values, about how committed we really are to helping those in need. Or are we living up to the ideals we talk about? Or are we letting those ideals slip away because of cynicism, self-interest, fear of people who are different from us?
That's a lot to think about. But this whole thing has really made me realize the power of one person speaking up. One whistleblower was brave enough to come forward, and now who knows? Maybe this will lead to real change. Maybe it will force people to be accountable, to actually fix things.
It shows that we all have a responsibility, right, to create a world that's more fair, more just. We can't just wait for someone else to do it. We have to stay informed. We have to be active in our communities. We have to make sure our leaders are doing the right thing.
So what can our listeners do? Where do they start?
Ask questions. Don't just take things at face value. Do some digging. Find out what different people are saying and be willing to, question your own beliefs and then take what you've learned and do something with it. Contact your representatives, support organizations that are working on these issues, volunteer, or even just talk to your friends and family about it. Every little bit counts.
This deep dive has been, let's just say it's been eye-opening. It's clear that this refugee resettlement program is just one part of a much bigger, much more complicated picture. But this whistleblower story, it's given us a look into some of the cracks in the system, and what can happen when we don't pay attention.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping to do with these deep dives, right? Get people thinking critically, encourage them to talk about these issues, to learn more, and hopefully to feel empowered to make a difference.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll definitely keep following this story and let you know what happens. In the meantime, stay curious, stay engaged, and remember, your voice matters. That's all for this deep dive. Until next time.